In America, everyone talks about grind culture, working hard, hustling, 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. They call it chasing the American dream. But sometimes, between rushed mornings and exhausted nights, you suddenly realize you've been working hard for years, only to end up right where you started. You might be earning more money than before, but you have less freedom, less happiness, and no clear idea of what you truly want anymore. Dean Graziosi once found himself in that exact same place, in debt, exhausted, and doubting his own worth. Until he realized this: the problem wasn't his skills, it was his habits. It's not the big decisions that shape your life, but the small actions you repeat every single day. The ones that quietly determine whether you stay stuck or break free. Dean Graziosi once said, "Successful people don't have better genes than you. They just have better habits." If you ever feel stuck, not because you're not working hard enough, but because something inside you keeps holding you back, then Millionaire Success Habits is where your real transformation begins. Not to turn you into someone else, but to help you become the richest, freest, and most fulfilled version of yourself. Part 1. Change your inner story. Dean Graziosi opens Millionaire Success Habits with a truth that makes many people pause and think. It's not your circumstances that stop you from succeeding. It's the story you keep telling yourself every single day that holds you back. Each of us carries a little voice in our head. Sometimes it sounds like our parents, our friends, or the society around us. And every time we try to step up, that voice whispers, "Maybe you should just be grateful for what you have. Don't risk it. People like us don't get second chances. Just get a stable job." It sounds reasonable because everyone says it. But over time, those words turn into invisible walls. They don't protect you, they trap you, keeping you safe inside a box where your dreams are labeled unrealistic. And the scariest part? We believe it. We live our entire lives following a script written by someone else, and then we wonder why we never move forward. Dean says most people aren't lacking skills or opportunities. They're lacking a new belief, one strong enough to rewrite their old story. Because before you can change your actions, you must first change the meaning you attach to who you are. Look around. In America, millions of people wake up every morning, make a cup of coffee, turn on the news, and mumble, "If only I made more money. If only I had the same chances as others." But they don't realize every "if only" is a form of programming. It reinforces the belief that they're missing something. And when you believe you're lacking, you'll keep living in lack. Dean once lived that exact story. Born into a poor family in New York, he grew up afraid of losing his home and worked blue-collar jobs just to pay the bills. No MBA, no investment capital, no connections. But he had one thing: the awareness that every result begins in the mind. He started observing successful people he admired: Tony Robbins, Richard Branson, self-made entrepreneurs who started from nothing. And he noticed something powerful. They didn't think like the rest of the world. When they failed, they didn't say, "I'm not good enough." They asked, "What can I learn from this?" When others said, "I can't," they asked, "If I could, how would I?" That was the turning point. Because the moment you ask a different question, you activate a different part of your brain. You're no longer trapped in your old story. You become the author of a new one. Dean calls this the inner script, and he insists to become wealthy, you must first make peace with yourself. You can't build an abundant life with thoughts that drain your energy. You can't attract wealth if deep down you still believe you don't deserve it. That's why he suggests a simple exercise. Every morning, write down one belief you want to adopt. Money flows to me because I create value. I can learn any skill I need for financial freedom. Repeat it every day until your mind starts believing it's true. It may sound small, but that's exactly how Dean began his journey from a broke construction worker to a self-made millionaire, a best-selling author, and a man who has inspired millions of Americans to change their lives. His story isn't about positive thinking. It's about reprogramming your internal operating system. Because as he says, you will never build $1 million life with a $100 mindset. When you change your inner story, the world outside begins to change too, because every result is simply a reflection of the beliefs you hold within. Part 2. Finding a why bigger than money. Dean Graziosi once said, "If your reason is big enough, you'll find a way. If it's not, you'll find an excuse." So many people say they want to make more money, but when you ask them why, most fall silent. Not because they don't care, but because they've never truly thought about it. You see, money has never been the real motivator, the thing that pushes you through sleepless nights, through failure, and through the doubts of others isn't the number in your bank account. It's the meaning behind it. A father who works himself to exhaustion doesn't do it for a bigger bonus. He does it because he wants his kids to grow up without the fear of scarcity he once knew. A woman who starts a business in the middle of a crisis isn't doing it for the title of CEO. She's doing it to prove to herself, I can build something on my own. That's the why, the kind of fuel that money can never buy. Dean shares that when he was broke, he once worked 3 jobs at the same time. Nobody believed he'd ever make something big out of his life. But he kept asking himself, what if my kids could grow up seeing what's possible, not what's practical? That question became his anchor every time he felt like giving up. If you work just for money, you'll stop when you're tired. But if you work for a why that's bigger than yourself, a purpose tied to who you are and the impact you want to leave, you'll discover energy you never knew you had. So take a moment and ask yourself, if I woke up tomorrow with an extra $1 million, what would I do differently? The answer to that question is your why. Money is the reward, but your why is the fuel. And no one can ever become truly wealthy until they know what they're really fighting for. Part 3. Work less, achieve more. If you pay attention, truly wealthy people don't do more than others. They simply do the right things. Dean Graziosi calls this the millionaire efficiency principle. Because in a world where everyone is busy, being busy is no longer a badge of success. It's a sign of poor focus. Think about this. You wake up, grab your phone, scroll through dozens of emails, texts, and notifications. You jump straight into the grind, responding, reacting, checking off one task after another. And by the end of the day, you're exhausted, but you don't actually feel like you've moved forward. That's what Dean calls the activity trap, the endless cycle of doing more but achieving less. Ordinary people try to do everything. Successful people focus on doing the right thing. Dean says one of the biggest turning points in his career was when he stopped asking, "What else do I need to do?" and started asking, "What do I need to stop doing so I can focus on what truly creates results?" When you step back, you'll see that 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts. That's the Pareto principle, and it's how the wealthy operate every single day. They don't race against time, they design it. They don't multitask, they prioritize. Here's a simple example. A small business owner in Texas once shared that instead of spending 10 hours a day juggling marketing, accounting, and operations, he hired a freelancer just to handle ads, so he could focus on talking to his customers. Within 3 months, his revenue doubled. He said, "I didn't work more, I just worked smarter." Dean calls this success through subtraction, because every no you say to what doesn't matter is a yes to what truly does. If you want to change your life, start by looking at your time. What percentage are you investing in things that create long-term value, and what percentage are you wasting on things that just keep you busy, not wealthy? The rich don't do it all. They do what matters most, and they do it with absolute focus.
Part 4. Building confidence through small wins. Dean Graziosi says, confidence doesn't come from knowing how things will turn out. It comes from taking action and realizing you won't break when things get hard. Most of us don't lack ability, we lack proof that we can. And that proof doesn't come from one big victory, but from a series of small wins built day by day. Think back to when you first learned to drive. Your hands were shaking, your heart was racing, and everything felt out of control. But after a few tries, a few mistakes, a few lessons, it started to feel natural. You weren't born to drive, you just kept winning small battles until fear had no power left. Dean calls this momentum confidence, confidence that grows from continuous forward motion. There's an American saying, success builds on success. No one jumps from zero to millionaire overnight. They get there one step at a time, one good decision repeated daily. The person who saves their first $500 starts to believe they can save $5,000. The person who earns their first $1,000 online starts to believe they can make $10,000. And slowly, belief becomes fuel. Dean shares that he started with nothing but an old pickup truck and determination. He didn't aim to become a millionaire from day one, he just set small goals. Sell 1 car this week, then 2, then open a small dealership. Each small victory became a brick, and those bricks built the foundation of a business empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The key is this: confidence doesn't come first. Action does. No one ever feels ready. If you wait until you're ready, you'll be waiting for life. Confidence isn't a gift, it's a result. It's what happens when you act long enough for your mind to say, "I've done it before, and I can do it again." So if you're just starting out, don't chase the giant leap. Chase the first step, the one small enough that you can't make an excuse not to take it. Win the battles you can control. Wake up 15 minutes earlier. Save $10. Finish one small task today. Those tiny wins don't just move you forward, they rebuild your belief that you're capable. Because as Dean says, you don't build confidence by waiting for success. You build it by proving to yourself that you can show up again and again. Part 5. Choosing your environment and influences. Dean Graziosi once said something simple, but powerful enough to make anyone stop and think. If you're always the smartest person in the room, it's time to find a new room. The truth is, we don't just become who we want to be, we become a reflection of the people we spend the most time with. If you're constantly surrounded by people who complain, make excuses, and never take risks, sooner or later you'll start to think, talk, and act just like them. Dean recalls his early years living in a small town in New York, where success simply meant having a steady job and paying the bills on time. No one talked about investing, entrepreneurship, or personal growth. And that's when Dean realized if he stayed in that environment, he'd only ever achieve what that environment allowed. So, he began searching for a new kind of environment, not necessarily a physical one, but a mental one. He listened to Tony Robbins' tapes in his old pickup truck, read every success book he could find at the local library, and joined small groups of people who were also hungry for more. And from there, his mindset began to shift. Because when you surround yourself with people who think bigger, your brain starts to believe that you can too. There's a popular saying in America: you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Dean takes it even further. You're also the average of what you listen to, watch, read, and choose to believe every day. If you spend hours consuming negative news, drama, or stories about failure, you're investing your mental energy in fear, not opportunity. But if you choose to listen to podcasts from people you admire, read books written by those who've walked the path you're on, or simply follow a few voices of inspiration instead of negativity, you're changing the fuel your brain runs on. Dean calls this environmental design for success, the art of designing your surroundings to serve your goals. He encourages creating micro-environments, moments, spaces, and relationships that nurture growth, because you can't plant a seed and expect it to thrive in dry soil, and you can't become a millionaire in a room full of people who doubt possibility. Perhaps the greatest lesson of this chapter is this: changing your environment isn't betraying your past. It's honoring the future you're stepping into. If you want to rise higher, spend time with people who are already ahead of you. If you want to think differently, walk into rooms that make you feel small, because only then can you truly grow.
Part 6. Replacing Limiting Habits. Dean Graziosi once said, "Your life doesn't change when you make more money. It changes when you replace the old habits that hold you back." Most of us believe that what keeps us stuck is our circumstances. Not enough money, not enough time, not enough opportunity. But as Dean points out, the real problem isn't out there. It's in the habits we've silently allowed to run our lives for too long. Think about your morning. You wake up, grab your phone, scroll through social media, and instantly feel behind because someone else seems to be doing better. You rush out the door, already drained, telling yourself, tomorrow will be different. But then tomorrow comes, and it's exactly the same. Dean calls this the loop of limitation. It's not that you're doing something wrong, it's that you're not aware of what you're doing at all. And the only way out isn't by trying to eliminate bad habits, but by replacing them with better ones. Habits that serve your future instead of your fears. Dean often shares the story of a friend who used to spend every evening watching TV after work, because that was his only way to relax. When Dean asked, "What could you do for just one of those hours that would make tomorrow better than today?" His friend started spending half an hour watching investing tutorials and the other half writing his personal financial plan. Within 6 months, he wasn't just thinking differently about money, he was actually investing. And the best part? He didn't feel like he gave up his old habit. He simply replaced it with something that nourished him. Dean reminds us that every habit, even the bad ones, offers a hidden benefit. When you procrastinate, you're avoiding the fear of failure. When you overspend, you're buying a sense of control. But once you recognize that hidden payoff, you can replace it with a more empowering action. For example, instead of checking your phone first thing in the morning for bad news, spend 5 minutes writing down 3 things you're grateful for. Instead of saying, "I'm not good enough to start," say, "I'm learning to get better every day." Instead of chasing validation, focus on progress, not applause. Dean calls this success substitution. the art of replacing limiting habits with stronger versions of yourself. You don't need to change 100 things at once. You just need to replace one habit a day to start moving out of the old story. Because you can't write a new chapter if you keep rereading the last one. Every small action you take today is a vote for the person you're becoming, Dean Graziosi. Once you understand that, you'll stop fighting your bad habits and start gently replacing them until you become living proof that wealth doesn't begin in your wallet. It begins in what you choose to repeat every single day.
Part 7. Learning to inspire and sell value. Dean Graziosi once said something that every true entrepreneur eventually understands. You can't change someone's life until you learn how to make them believe in themselves first. Throughout his journey, Dean realized something powerful. Everyone loves to buy, but no one likes to be sold. The difference between a salesperson and an inspirer is simple. One talks about the product, the other talks about the person their customer will become after having it. Imagine this. You walk into a car dealership, and the salesperson says, "This car has 300 horsepower and goes from 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds. Nice, but forgettable. Now, imagine they said, "This car will make you feel the same freedom you felt the first time you drove out of town after graduation." That's not just a car. That's an emotion, an experience, a story you want to be part of. Dean calls this selling transformation. It's not about selling products. It's about selling change. And he believes that everyone, whether you're an entrepreneur, an employee, or a creator, needs to learn this skill. Because whether you realize it or not, you're always selling something. Your ideas, your work, your values, your belief in yourself. Dean often shares that when he first started out, he wasn't a best-selling author or a famous speaker. He was a broke mechanic, selling small real estate courses out of his pickup truck. He had no degree, no reputation, no audience. But he had one thing most people lose along the way: an unshakable belief that I'm not selling them a product. I'm helping them see a better version of themselves. And when he spoke, people felt that. Not through fancy words, but through genuine energy that made them think, if he can do it, maybe I can too. That's the core of Millionaire Success Habits. You don't have to be great at persuasion. You just have to be authentic in your mission. When you truly believe that what you offer can make someone's life better, your voice, your eyes, your stories, your actions, they all become magnetic. Dean puts it perfectly. Successful people aren't just good at making money. They're good at making others believe that change is possible. That's how you sell value instead of stuff. When you share your personal story, you're not bragging. You're building a bridge of trust. When you talk about your failures, you're not making yourself look weak. You're showing that you're human. When you help someone overcome fear, you're not just helping them. You're reminding yourself of your own strength. Selling at its highest level isn't about convincing someone to open their wallet. It's about awakening the belief that's been sleeping inside them. And the irony is, when you stop trying to sell, you start to truly make an impact. And that's when money begins to find you. Wealth isn't about how much you earn. It's about how many people get better because of you. Once you understand this, every conversation, every product, every piece of content you create becomes a chance to deliver value, to inspire others, and to change someone's life, while transforming your own.
Part 8. Gratitude, the complete circle of wealth. There's something fascinating about truly wealthy people. It's not that they have more, it's that they feel enough. Dean Graziosi calls this the circle of gratitude, the part that completes the journey of wealth by beginning a new cycle of happiness, contribution, and growth.
Dean once shared a story. After signing a multi-million-dollar deal, he sat alone in his office, surrounded by everything he had once dreamed of, and yet he felt empty. Not because he was tired of money, but because he realized that he had been running so fast that he forgot why he started. So he stopped, picked up the phone, and called his mom, the woman who once worked 2 or 3 jobs just to raise him. When she laughed and said, "I'm so proud of you, honey," Dean said it felt like no amount of money could compare to that single moment. That's when it hit him. Gratitude doesn't just make you happy, it keeps you grounded. In America, we're often taught to run faster, push harder, get more. But Dean reminds us, if you're not grateful for what you have today, even 10 times more won't make you feel complete. Gratitude isn't about settling, it's the foundation of true abundance. Because when you practice gratitude, you stop seeing others as competitors and start seeing them as inspirations. You stop viewing money as the goal and start using it as a tool for impact. You stop living in fear of loss and start living with peace, knowing you already have enough. Dean has a simple morning ritual. He writes down 3 things he's grateful for. Not big things like a house or a car, but small, beautiful moments like, "My daughter smiled when I dropped her off at school. My coffee tasted better than usual. A stranger smiled at me at a red light." And the magic is, your brain starts looking for more things to be grateful for. It's like when you buy a red car, suddenly you see red cars everywhere. Gratitude works the same way. It helps you see abundance that was always there. That's why Dean says, gratitude isn't just an emotion, it's a strategy for sustaining wealth. Because when you're grateful, you naturally want to give more. Your time, your knowledge, your love, your opportunities. And through that act of giving, the flow of abundance returns to you. Many people say, "I'll be grateful when I'm rich." But Dean proved the opposite. When you're grateful, that's when you become truly rich. Take a moment to look at your life today. What do you have now that 5 years ago felt like a dream? A better job? A loving partner? A peaceful home? Or maybe just the time to read, to learn again? If you can recognize that, congratulations. You've already stepped into the complete circle of wealth, where money is only the reward, and true abundance lives within you. As Dean Graziosi said, gratitude turns what we have into enough, and enough is the truest definition of wealth. If you've made it this far, you've probably felt something deep inside. Millionaire Success Habits isn't just a book about making money. It's a roadmap to finding your way back to yourself. Dean Graziosi doesn't write about get-rich formulas. He writes about habits, beliefs, and small daily actions that little by little can pull you out of the loop of worry and move you toward financial freedom. But starting first with freedom of the mind. Because true wealth isn't about having more than others. It's about feeling enough, feeling free, and helping others experience the same. And this book shows you exactly how to begin, step by step, habit by habit, thought by thought. If you want to go deeper into this journey, to truly reprogram the operating system of your own success, you can find the link in the description below to listen to or read the full Millionaire Success Habits by Dean Graziosi. Because sometimes one right habit is all it takes to change the entire direction of your life.